All right. Hello.
Yeah.
Welcome to the webinar. Yeah. Okay, we're good. I'll move my computer over so you can have access to it.
We got one person.
Welcome to the webinar. As you're joining us, please find the poll question at the bottom left-hand side. If you could answer it before we start, that would be great. We'll be starting in a few minutes. All right, we have a few more people joining us. We're going to start in 1 minute, but if you could take the time to answer the poll question at the bottom left-hand corner, you should see it under polls, or you should see it in the top when you first log in. That would be great. We're starting in 1 minute. All right, it's 11 a.m. Central Time, so we're going to begin. Welcome, everyone, to Accelerate Your Digital Growth, Free Technology for Tour Guides. My name is Kartik, and I'll be your host today. Before we jump into the content, a few quick logistics that I want to cover. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we have a poll question for all of the attendees, just to gauge where everybody's at with this topic. If you could answer that at the bottom left-hand corner, that would be great. You should see it under the poll tab. Recording will be sent out to all the registrants a couple hours after the webinar. You can use the chat to share any technical issues. We have a person standing by to answer any questions that you may have regarding hearing the webinar or looking at the slides. You can ask questions throughout, and we'll address in a Q&A at the end. Use the submit question box. You should see that in the question tab underneath the webinar slides as well. Your first name will appear when you ask. A little bit of background on me. My name is Kartik, as I mentioned. I am a customer success and account manager at VAMONDE. In my role, I work with tour guides across the country, especially in cities like Chicago, Austin, New York, and help them convert and create great digital content that they can then use to market and share their booking pages. I have a degree in information design and strategy from Northwestern. I'm really excited about this role because I'm really excited about the intersection between storytelling and technology, especially how both of those together can really move your business forward or help you better market your business to a wide audience. A little bit about VAMONDE. So VAMONDE is a digital experience platform that is really committed to connecting people with places. We were founded 4 years ago and are based in Chicago. And our goal is to really address a major issue that we see in the tourism industry, which is the growth of technology that makes it hard for audiences to really connect with all of the rich content that museums, tour guides, et cetera, are really sharing out to visitors and even locals that are in a city. For tour guides specifically, I know there's often a struggle with how do I allocate my resources and time effectively to keep up with these changes. VAMONDE is really here to help you bridge this gap by providing free technology that benefits your organization as a whole and helps you deliver great content to the right audience. An overview of what we'll be covering today. So we'll start off with why digital technology matters. Why is it really important that we're talking about this topic today? We'll then jump into digital content for tour guides, and I'll mention some ways that tour guides currently are creating digital content and some of the challenges associated with that. We'll jump into a couple examples of ways that different tour guides have used VAMONDE, and we'll even have a tour guide join us on our webinar today and present a little bit about his organization and why he decided to use VAMONDE to amplify his tour experience. We'll then end with a Q&A and a chance for you to contact us for more information. Now I want to start off with a little exercise. Take a moment to imagine a traveler arriving to a new city. What do they look like? How are they interacting with people around them, with the buildings and the city as a whole? When I really think about this, I think about a sole backpacker with a map in his hand, navigating like a small alleyway or like a small street with historical buildings on either side. He stumbles upon a local cafe and orders coffee and so on and so forth. But in reality, when we look at how people are interacting with new cities that they're exploring, they're doing it through technology, through their phones, through their desktop. And it's really about, for them, how can I get the most out of my experience by using technology as a conduit. So they're using technology to collect and share memories, to research, to find local attractions and tours to book. They're using it to navigate, especially around a new city where they don't know the layout as well. So the reasons for really investing in technology are, one, that technology use in tourism has really exploded, especially with the different uses that users are using when they arrive at a city, but also with self-guided tour apps, different technologies to book travel, to research travel, and even to navigate around a city. The other thing that really makes it important to invest in technology is the fact that 85% of travelers decide what to do after arriving at a new destination. So it's really important for tour guides specifically to make sure that they're sharing rich content in that part of the traveler experience so that travelers interact with their content, engage with and are interested in it, and then go forward to book one of your tours. The challenge, of course, with making sure that you're creating great content that's attracting this audience is, how do I allocate my resources and time effectively in order to make sure that I'm getting the most out of this investment? And the ways that we heard different tour guides doing that is through creating digital content. And a couple of examples of what digital content tour guides we spoke to were creating were revamping or redesigning or optimizing their website to make sure that it was standing out and it was easy to navigate and it was designed well so that it was eye-catching to the user. The major way that tour guides were creating content was through blogs. They were managing their own blog page, compiling content, posting it on their blog, and then marketing their blog as a way to attract different travelers. The last way was really looking out to see different publications and different sites and how they could add their information as almost like a listing to each of those sites. Now, these are all important ways to connect with travelers, but there are also some challenges associated with them. One of the major challenges is that this is a really time-consuming approach. It takes a lot of time to figure out what content you want to share, pull together text, pull together images for that content, for that blog post, upload that blog post, and then market it effectively using social media and other platforms. The other challenge is that for tour guides that have separate blog pages, they're often having to compete between, do I market my blog? Do I market my booking page or site? And how do I really optimize the two in order to create the most effective digital strategy? The last thing is that many tour guides that we spoke to said, I'm already sharing content on my tours. It doesn't make sense for me to compile new content or revamp new content in these different fields when I'm doing it on a day-to-day basis here, and it's taking up most of my time. And so these tour guides really felt like digital content was, especially new digital content, was really unnecessary or difficult given their schedules to really put together and implement. From this feedback, what I really took from this is that, one, there are several different approaches at play here, but what's really important that we still stick to is that storytelling is the major way that you connect with travelers that are visiting your destination. So the best way to do that, we found through VAMONDE, was really to utilize existing content. So whatever you're sharing in your existing tours or things you've created for old blog posts, and leverage that content effectively by combining it with easy access to your booking site to make sure that you create eye-catching digital content that's attracting the viewers that you're looking for, and then eventually leading to bookings on your site. To illustrate a couple examples, I pulled together some case studies of different tour guides and other organizations that we worked with, and really tried to distill three major ways that digital tech can help tour guides. One is using existing content to help you market and promote your tours. The second way is really to use content to amplify your in-tour experience so that you can differentiate your tours amongst all the other tours that are out there. And the third way is really to help you share your passion, your story, your unique point of view, as well as if you have self-guided tours, help you share those effectively as well. So our first case study is on CHICA-GO Tours. A little bit of background on CHICA-GO. This company was founded in 2015 by Lancia. Lancia is an immigrant from Belgium, and she had a background as a journalist and being a tour guide in Belgium as well. She founded CHICA-GO, and its major clientele is tourists from Belgium, France, the Netherlands, and Quebec in Canada. Her reason to investigate, or her interest in VAMONDE, is really coming from the fact that she wanted to find a way to effectively use her existing tour content to market and promote her tours. She also wanted to find a way to stop creating as many blog posts and leverage existing content to drive her social media promotions. With VAMONDE, we were able to create a teaser tour experience, as I like to call it. So essentially, this was one of the tours that she offered, but she didn't showcase her entire tour. She was able to distill 3 or 4 unique locations that really reflected her point of view, her unique storytelling ability, as well as the off-the-beaten-path nature of her tours in general. And so the tour is titled Off the Beaten Path with the Belgian, and really highlights 4 locations around Chicago that have unique Belgian connections. With this tour as well, what was really important to her was that the locations that she chose were near important tourist destinations or landmarks. So if you can see, they're all around downtown Chicago. She wanted it to, going back to our initial point, she wanted to make sure that she was getting travelers that were coming to Chicago and then exploring what they wanted to do, or were already at a tourist location and they wanted to find a unique off the beaten path location to explore next. With VAMONDE as well, Lancia was able to really create a multimedia experience. With blogs, you're often limited to text and pictures, but she was able to include very engaging video that reflected not only the location and why it was interesting, but also reflected her unique take on each of these locations. The last thing that made this content really effective was easy access to her booking site. So she was able to, if you can see in the orange circled area, she was able to directly link her booking page into VAMONDE so that all people needed to do is read a little bit about the content. They were interested, they could click Let's Walk, and this would take them to their booking page to book the tour. After creating her content, as I mentioned, Lensha really wanted to use this content to promote on social, which is what she did. This is an example of one of her posts on Facebook. Her post actually led to a 50% increase in engagement compared to her normal blog or regular posts. So she was really excited to use VAMONDE as a new way to even amplify the performance of her existing social media outreach. And finally, I want to discuss the results of her promotions. In a couple of months, Lensha was able to get over 4,000 views of her content on both web and mobile from a brand new audience that she hadn't really reached before. She has already had over 5 digital experiences published, each reflecting a different tour that she offers, and is able to use VAMONDE in over 10 different social media promotions. Lensha is going to continue to publish more of her tours, but at the meantime, she's really focused on integrating her new booking site through engaging links and finding a way to help increase that conversion to bookings from VAMONDE. Our next case study, and I'm really excited because the tour guide has decided to join us today, but our next case study is on Friends of the White City, and that organization is led by Ray Johnson. Ray, could you introduce yourself to the group, talk a little bit about History Cop, Friends of the White City, as well as how the partnership between VAMONDE and Friends of the White City really began?
Sure. So my name is Ray Johnson, as Kartik said, and I'm a retired detective from just outside of Chicago, and always been a big fan of history. And so when I left police work, I decided to delve kind of full-fledged into the history side of it, which is where History Cop came from. So I initially just started a website and a blog, started writing books on Chicago history. And then that sort of led to becoming kind of an accidental tour guide, because people would say, well, if we're visiting Chicago, could you take us on like a informal tour? And then eventually I started developing tours for the general public. Now, Friends of the White City is kind of an offshoot of that, because I've always been a big fan of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, and most people only know of it from Eric Larson's book, Devil in the White City. I was really kind of shocked that, being that I'm from Chicago and most of the people I know are from Chicago, many of them had never even heard of the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. So as I delved more into that topic, I thought, what a cool thing to kind of share with people, especially in the park where it happened, Jackson Park and Midway Plaisance. Currently, we run, I started Friends of the White City, which is a nonprofit group specifically designed to educate people on the significance of the White City. And that's when I kind of set up a partnership with the Jackson Park Advisory Council. And so we share kind of the responsibility of giving a lot of the tours. But really, I kind of wanted to bring the experience of the White City alive, which is really hard to do, since a lot of the 200 buildings, there's only pretty much one left in Jackson Park, which is the Museum of Science and Industry. So initially I relied on photographs. So I'd have laminated photographs that I'd bring with and kind of guide people through the park and tell them where they're standing and give them a map, an overlay map that I developed, which I'd actually probably going to add to the VAMONDE adventure, but it's kind of an overlay map of Jackson Park and the World's Fair, so people can get an idea when they're standing in the park what they'd actually see. So it's really hard when you're actually in the park. It was over 600 acres to kind of see from the person's standpoint what they would have been seeing at the time. And so actually, I'm a big fan of Eric Larson's book, Devil in the White City. So H.H. Holmes was a big topic of mine as well. And I delved a little bit further into it than Eric Larson did. And so my first VAMONDE experience was, it's called The Windy City Demon, because I didn't want to encroach on Eric Larson's copyright on Devil in the White City. So, but it's more of a walking tour that people could take. A lot of people assume from the book that he only operated at 63rd and Wallace, and that building is no longer there, but he was more than a serial killer. He was a con man, and so I tried to follow him as a cop, kind of get in his head and kind of follow his con games, and it suddenly came out that he was a lot more active in the Loop, in the Chicago Loop, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. So I decided to do a walking, self-guided walking tour of the different spots where H.H. Holmes had operated, and where people could see things that he may have seen at the time that he was operating. But I also used a digital platform because a lot of those buildings don't exist. So when I put videos together, people could see. I would make the video so that they would be seeing what they're saying, but on the video, and then see the building kind of appear in the video over what they would be seeing. But then again, I always thought it'd be really cool to do AR, and that's where the White City comes in, and we can talk about that in a little bit.
Great, thank you, Ray. So as Ray mentioned, he really wanted to create a tour that made the 1893 World's Fair come alive, and he did that through a couple of different ways. One was through incorporating his research as a history buff and as a head of a research company that does historical research, to incorporate really specific details, photographs, etc., into his 1893 World Tour, as you can see on the picture on the left. Something else that Ray mentioned earlier was to make sure that visitors that were going on the tour could really see exact locations of where structures would have stood in Jackson Park in 1893 for the World's Fair. So we got precise latitude and longitude coordinates that we were able to enter across the park so that you could tell exactly where you were standing. This used to be this, or this building stood over there. What really made this experience come alive was the mixture of multimedia elements and then AR, which I'll show you a glimpse of in a little bit. So Ray was able to add a lot of different videos, as well as a lot of different historical images, to make this experience really stand out and not just feel like a history lesson, but actually feel like you're immersed in the fair. AR is probably the coolest dimension that we added to this experience. So as you can see, the user would have to tap here and hold over an image. And then this is what they would see on their phone when they were looking out into Jackson Park. So they could actually see the structure standing where it looks like it's just parkland, sidewalk, and apartment buildings on the left. But they could actually see the structure of the Illinois building, which was one of the buildings of the fair, directly on their phone and really live that experience. After creating the experience, Ray was also able to promote it on social media, doing a number of different posts and really sharing his passion for this topic, but also getting some awareness of the tours that he's running on Saturday to a wider audience. And with that, with his promotions and this tour itself, he was able to increase his digital views by over 1,200%. As he mentioned, he has 2 digital experiences published now, and the 1893 experience averages about 200 to 300 views a week, which is pretty significant. The next steps here are definitely to add more AR functionalities and help this experience stand out above all of the other 1893 World's Fair tours that exist, to something that's really engaging, interesting, and also rooted in history and fact. The last case study that I want to talk about is not of a tour guide specifically, but of a cultural group. And the reason I want to bring this up is that this organization dealt with a challenge in a very unique way that several tour guides face. So the organization was NYC LGBT Historic Sites Project. They are a historical registry based in New York, and their focus is on collecting historical artifacts, history, as well as locations of places around New York City where LGBT history happened, and collecting that information and sharing that to a wide audience. They wanted to offer a self-guided tour, and their first approach was to create a giant map listing all of the different sites. There are hundreds of sites around New York City, and have users just navigate to whichever site they wanted or whichever the site they were close to. This wasn't very organized. They weren't getting the right level of engagement and awareness. And so they really turned to VAMONDE to create what I like to call a pseudo app, or what we call a channel within the VAMONDE app itself. And so this is a specific page dedicated to the organization where they can feature all of their different walking tours by neighborhood. So they can split up from that giant map into a Stonewall Village walking tour, Upper West Side walking tour, LGBT Brooklyn walking tour, and make these self-guided walking tours a little bit more manageable and a little bit more accessible to people as they were visiting New York or really engaged in this topic. Let's take a look at one of the specific experiences so I can show you a little bit about how they did this. So the Stonewall LGBT Village walking tour wanted to showcase Stonewall, which is an important site and an important event, but also really wanted to focus on local culture and history. So just as Stonewall is really important to this historical information, so is the Mattachine Society office, which you may have never heard of. So really rich information on some of these off the beaten path locations was their goal with these walking tours. What was great about, going back to that slide, what was great about these walking tours as well is that they were able to arrange these walking tours not by a certain order, but by which location the person was closest to. Several tour guides that we spoke to said that self-guided tours were kind of rigid. They had to send a sheet of like all these stops, and people kind of followed all the stops in order. They weren't able to provide really rich content. And so with VAMONDE, they were able to create unique walking tours that adapted to a person based on where they were standing around the city or where they were located around the city. So let's say the society office was the closest location to me. That would come up first. I could start my tour right away and then go to the other locations afterward. The other thing about this too was that the content was really rich. They spent months working on compiling quotes, interviews, historical information, historical images, and this was their real chance to show that effectively and not have little snippets on a map that gave them a brief description of each of the locations. So they could really go in depth and get to broader themes of New York City history or broader LGBT history across America. This project officially launched yesterday, and even before that, for the soft launch, they had over 2,000 views of their content already. Since it's Pride Month, this is a very important topic for a lot of people, so it's getting a lot of attention, but they were able to effectively create these tours and market these tours and share their passion for LGBT history in a really digitally savvy way. Those were the 3 examples that I wanted to cover. Before we jump into questions, a couple key takeaways that I want to share. Tour guides can really use digital content to do 3 things really well. You can create content specifically for marketing and to drive visitation as well as bookings to your site. You can use digital content to inspire tour goers to elevate your in-tour experience and really differentiate your tour from some of the other tours that are being offered. You can also use digital content to share your passion for these topics and create self-guided tours that can then lead to piquing interest in your other tours that you offer in general. Overall, these 3 things you can focus on one, or you can do all 3 together if that's your goal or strategy. The last thing I want to say is that overall, it's not time-consuming, costly, or difficult to invest in digital content if you choose the right type of digital content to focus your resources in, and if you use existing tour content to help drive your promotions and move your business forward. With that, I'm going to move it over to questions. We are really excited to have Ray here to help you answer some of these questions. So if you have specific questions on what it's like to work with VAMONDE or some of the challenges of running tours and etc., Ray can definitely answer those questions for you. Looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat that I'll get started in. First one from Tanya is there a good POS system linked to a ticketing system? VAMONDE just offers you the ability to link your existing booking and web information to content that you're already creating and generating. So the focus here is on giving you easy access and direct links, and we don't offer a POS system. The next question, are there tour operators with mobile apps, and what are most important benefits? I would say some of the larger tour operators probably have mobile apps. If you, when I was in South Africa, there was like a huge tour company and they had a mobile app that just showcased all of their tours. Some of the challenges of the mobile app there were that nobody was really using it because everybody was kind of focused on the in-person physical tour guide experience. The other thing too is that as an international traveler, it was really hard for me to use that app effectively. I had to go to Wi-Fi locations. The Wi-Fi can sometimes cut out. With VAMONDE, what's really nice is that you can actually download your app directly to this. Ray, do you have something to add?
No, the way I've used it, and that is true that as you're giving the physical tour, people like to pay attention to the tour guide and not necessarily to their mobile device.
Yeah.
Now there are some dead times. I'll encourage people to download it before the tour starts.
Mm-hmm.
What I am going to do is on my website encourage people to download it ahead of time. So as they're booking the tour, say you can download a digital, I'll call it a companion app.
Yeah.
So that the people that are digitally savvy would have it downloaded before we started.
Right.
And then a lot of times with mine, I try to stay on a certain time frame because the people going on the tours usually pay for parking. So it's like really important that you get back, unless all of your people end up getting tickets or whatnot, which is not good. So what I'll do is if I see the time running short, I'll say, well, we don't have time to cover this, but this is in the app and you can learn more about this on your own time. Or some people will be visiting Chicago for 2 weeks and we may not get to a certain part of the tour that they were really looking forward to. And I'll say, well, you can always come back anytime you want and start the app and you'll see me again, only I'll be on video and kind of explaining the things that we missed.
That's a really good point. Something every time we find her, she's like, what are you doing after? So she's download one, you can find one shot.
Right.
Content.
Sure.
See, that's a good question. Thank you, Tanya. Is that better? All right. We do launches based on amount of content that we have for each city. So the minimum number of content that we need is 9 experiences or 9 separate tours, if you're thinking about it in a tour perspective. So once we have that content, we can help launch your city. What we've started doing with some of our tour guides in cities that haven't been launched yet is helping them. We'll create some content, you'll create some content, get to that 9, and then we can launch your city together. And you will be the first tour guide of your city and get that, get the positive effects of being the first adopter. Any other questions, especially for Ray? If there aren't any other questions, I'll give it 15 more seconds. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank you all for joining us. Keep an eye out for the recording. For further questions or to schedule a demo, you can email kartik@vamonde.com. If you want to talk to Ray out of the webinar, I can send you his email if he's okay with that as well. And so you can learn a little bit from a fellow tour guide about working with VAMONDE. If you just want to learn more, you can go to www.info.vamonde.com and learn a little bit about how we serve other customers. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.